Track 1, and this talk is Godel's Incompleteness and the Strange Troubles of the Logical Heart of Mathematics with Remkes Kooistra, Assistant Professor of Mathematics at King's University College. He received his PhD from the University of Alberta and also studied at the University of Utrecht. Sorry.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you to the organizers. Lovely to see so many of you here. I'm excited to give this talk. I am a professor here in town at King's, and I was very pleased to be invited to share some mathematics with you. I'm not a logician. I am a geometer, as was referenced in also the geometers in the room. But I'm interested in the logic that underpins mathematics. So I want to share with you some of those ideas. Special thanks also to Douglas Hofstadter, a name some of you might recognize. I've read a great deal of Hofstadter, and the ideas in this talk, I wouldn't put them together without that reading, and some of it I pulled directly out of his books. So those of you who are well read in Hofstadter will recognize some of that material. So what are we doing? The purpose of the talk is to examine some of the foundations of the scientific experiment. Science relies, to a great extent, upon mathematics to measure, to provide models, to provide quantification of what it's doing. Mathematics relies on an underpinning itself, an underpinning of logic and set theory. Set theory is the basis on which mathematics is built. It comes from a set of axioms, and we use those axioms with a set of logical rules to put together the edifice that is mathematics. The question we want to ask is, how firm is that foundation? How reliable are those sets of axioms and the logical rules that put them together? If we're going to build the edifice of science on top of mathematics, and mathematics on top of logic and set theory, we would like this foundation to be reliable. So, let's look into some of the questions of the logical foundation of mathematics and ask, are they complete? Are they consistent? Are they unique? And these are some of the questions that mathematical logicians spend their time thinking about. And these are the questions that, in particular, Godel, who is the name of this title, was thinking about. How firm is that foundation? If there are cracks in this foundation, what does it mean? What are the implications of potential problems in hard mathematics? What are the epistemological implications? What does it mean about our scientific knowledge? What are the moral implications? What does it mean about the things we know and the things we do with that knowledge? I'm going to start historically, and we're going to go back to the year 1900 and to an amazing character in the history of mathematics, the mathematician Hilbert. And we're going to go to Paris in 1900, not to the World Fair, but to another event in the same summer, in the same city, the International Congress of Mathematicians in Paris in 1900. This was a large meeting of mathematicians. And at this Congress, Hilbert, a preeminent mathematician in his day, a major figure, had done research in wide branches of mathematics, very, very well respected. He gave an address to the International Congress of Mathematicians, and he gave them 23 problems, 23 very, very famous problems that were to be the problems that would set out what mathematics was going to do in the 20th century. The second problem, prove the axioms of arithmetic are consistent. The second problem is exactly the problem I introduced to you. The logical foundations of mathematics. It may seem surprising to you that mathematics hasn't been as logical and rigorous throughout history as we think of it today. Even in the development of calculus, Newton and Leibniz in the 17th century, it was actually pretty ad hoc. I mean, they were doing good things, but their logic wasn't particularly sound. They were sort of throwing stuff together. The arguments were a bit loose. It wasn't really until the 19th century, coming out of the French Revolution, the Enlightenment, these kind of philosophical traditions, the mathematicians really sat down and said, all right, we need to make this rigorous, we need to make this clear, we need to make this consistent, and they started coming up with these axioms to say how can we build arithmetic, and particularly the counting numbers, the natural numbers. At the end of the 19th century, the year 1900, David Hilbert sees this progress in the 19th century and says, big problem of the 20th century, let's finish this project. Let's see, can we take this 19th century work, making mathematics rigorous, can we finish it off, can we make sure that it's consistent? So, if that's the goal, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that logical systems are prone to paradox. The problem with paradox comes from self-reference. And in language, this comes up all the time. And in language, this is sort of understandable. And what I want to start with is I want to start with some linguistic examples. And some of these you've probably seen before. There's some very famous ones. Is the sentence true or false? If the sentence is true, well then what it says is true. What it says is false, therefore it must be false. Well, if it's false, what it says is false, therefore it must be true. It's a contradiction. The sentence is impossible. The sentence is a paradox, and the paradox exists because the sentence references itself. The sentence says something about itself. That's the problem. And Hilbert knew this, and the people who were working after Hilbert knew that the problem came from paradox arising out of self-reference. A classical example coming from the ancient world. Well, priest is a liar. Well, you can't trust the priest. The priest is a liar. So the statement has no truth or false value. It's impossible to assign a truth or false value. This is where I really get into the Douglas Hofstadter side of things, because Douglas Hofstadter has far too much fun with self-referential sentences. If you enjoy this kind of thing, seriously, go read this stuff. It gets more and more fun. See what you think of this sentence. That sentence true or false or neither. Try and parse that for a second.
It wouldn't make a difference.
It just gets more and more fun. Well, it's not written in Chinese, so obviously it's false. Well, it's false. That means that it's not true. That means it wouldn't be true if it were written in Chinese. But that means it's not true. That means what? Does that mean it's true in the first place? I like this one. You can keep going. The problem here is obvious in language. And it's understandable in language. Language is loose. It consists of symbols and signs and things that are not precisely defined. When we speak, we don't speak in exact, definitive, logical, mathematical terms. That's fine. That's as it should be. When we communicate with language, we don't need to communicate in exact, precise, logical terms. But this is a problem when we get into logic, into mathematics. So this is to get you thinking about the problem of self-reference and how it's going to play into the logical foundation of mathematics. So, situation. Hilbert started the 20th century, set out this project. We've got the realization that self-reference and paradox is a problem. Introducing now the character of Bertrand Russell, a character that some of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with. Hugely important character in the history of science. Many, many different ways. Analytic philosophy, positivism, pacifism, socialism, atheism, humanitarianism, opposition to nuclear armament. Very, very interesting character, Bertrand Russell. In this context, known for a work called Principia Mathematica, which he wrote with Russell Whitehead in 1900. Logical foundation of mathematics. His attempt to solve Hilbert's second problem. His attempt to put together a logical, consistent foundation for mathematics. And how this was done, as mentioned before, this is done with set theory. This is what mathematics is based upon. It's based upon a theory of sets. This is perhaps a surprise to some people. People assume mathematics starts with numbers. Not necessarily the case. Numbers are typically built out of first starting with sets. sets. So Principia Mathematica is a system of set theory and then builds numbers out of set theory. Bertrand Russell knew about paradox from self-reference. In fact, he knew well enough that the version of this self-referential paradox in mathematics is actually called Russell's paradox. This is the set theory version of exactly the same sentences we saw before. So the set theory version says, consider a set of all sets which do not contain themselves. What is going on here? Why will the set contain itself? This seems very, very strange and bizarre. Sets are boxes. How can a box contain itself? So obviously most sets don't contain themselves, but it's actually a valid thing in set theory for a set to contain itself. And so you can have a set of all sets which do not contain themselves. And then you ask, well, is this set a member of itself? And I'm not going to go first on this. Let me give you an analog, which is, I think, in fact, due to Bertrand Russell, not due to him. This is a very, very old translation of Bertrand Russell's paradox. The barber is the man in the village who shaves all the men who do not shave themselves, so the barber shaves himself. If he shaves himself, he can't shave himself. He only shaves people who don't shave themselves. Same paradox as all Cretans are liars. Same paradox as this sentence is false. But now encoded into set theory, existing in the logical piece of mathematics. This is the problem. How are you supposed to build a logical foundation for mathematics if you've got self-referential paradox sitting inside it? This is what we have to solve. And this is what Russell and Whitehead were trying to solve in Principia Mathematics. And to solve it, they came up with a system that said, well, if self-reference is the problem, let us make self-reference illegal. Let us expunge self-reference from our system of logic. Not allowed. Can't do it anymore. In order to do that, what they did is they set up a hierarchy of types. Everything in Principia falls into a type, and statements can only reference things which are of a lower type. So statements can now no longer talk about themselves, because statements can only talk about things which are of a lower type. So you want to make a statement about numbers, they can only talk about numbers. Numbers are a lower type than statements about numbers, and statements about numbers are a higher type than statements about numbers. And we have a little bit of a problem with infinite regress, but don't worry about that for now. This is a reasonable solution for calling self-reference illegal, saying we're going to get rid of it, we're going to enforce this notion that we have a hierarchy of types. We're not allowed to have self-reference in this system. And people said, oh, that's excellent, it's wonderful, we have a solution. We have at least a reasonable candidate in Principia Mathematica that sets up a hierarchy of types and says, yes, here is logical mathematics, no self-reference, no paradox. We can go on our merry way and set up a logical foundation that is secure and complete. And this is where we were in 1910, 1920. Before I get to the next little piece of the picture, I want to talk briefly about what Principia actually does, because in order to get to the next piece of the picture, I have to talk about what Principia accomplishes. Principia accomplishes building arithmetic, and arithmetic can build number theory. And those of you who were at Paul talked briefly about what number theory consists of. Number theory consists of things you can say about numbers. This is a statement of number theory. This is a statement of number theory. This is a statement of number theory. As is this. 91 is 7 times 13. Even though it looks wrong. This is a very famous statement about number theory. All these are statements about numbers. These are things that can be established in the system built by Principia Mathematica. So these are the kind of things that this nice, good, logical hierarchy of types, non-self-referential system can build. So, 1931, enter Kurt Gödel. And there's an interesting connection actually between Bertrand Russell and Kurt Gödel. Russell supervised Ludwig Wittgenstein, the famous 20th century philosopher, wrote his Tacticus, very, very important piece of 20th century philosophy. The Vienna Circle of Logical Positivists, part of this Similar movement to what Hilbert was about, this movement of empiricism, this movement of creating a logical foundation, evidence-based, reality-based on science and understanding what was going on with our world. Coming out of Wittgenstein, Gödel was actually involved in the Vienna Circle of Logical Positivists. So there's this sort of development from Russell to Wittgenstein to Godel before Godel started looking carefully at Principia. So enter Godel in 1930, and he was thinking about Principia, and he was thinking about self-reference, and he wasn't convinced that Bertrand Russell got it right. He wasn't convinced that the theory of types actually solved the problem. And the reason was, Principia built number theory. Well, numbers are actually surprisingly powerful things. And what Godel says is, I can take numbers and I can do an awful lot with them. One of the things I can do with them is I can use them to catalog or encode the statements of Principia mathematics, the logical statements. So for each statement in number theory, I can give it a number. So the statement equals 2, get some number. I'm not going to worry about how it gets a number. It's a complicated system. To get big numbers, you recognize the right numbers. The numbers are much, much, much larger. They wouldn't fit my slides. This gets this number. Maybe this one gets this number. But Godel says, I'm going to give statements numbers. And I'm going to do it consistently so that each statement gets a unique number. And Principia is rigorous enough, this works. And then I can ask questions. Well, 2 equals 2 is true. So 72,900 is the number of a true statement. 2 equals 3 is false. So 34,500 is the number of a false statement. Well, I just now created a new property of numbers. This is actually number theory. I can give you a number, and I can say, is this number prime? It's a rather valid question. But now I can ask a similar question, given a number, is this number the Godel number of a true statement in number theory? It's just another property of numbers. Because Godel's main insight is that numbers are immensely powerful. They can do all this stuff. He did it all with the mechanisms of Principia Mathematica. It's nothing additional. The Godel numbering of the theorems of Principia Mathematica was done with the mechanisms of Principia Mathematica. So, he says, now, I've numbered these things. Some statements are true, they get numbers. I can ask, given a number, is it the number of a true statement? Then, where do we go? Well, he constructs a very, very special statement in Principia Mathematica. And the statement is that this number g, so some special number, some very, 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 very large number that would really be not fit on many, many slides. This number g is not the Godel number of a true statement in Principia Mathematica. This is a statement of number theory. So I can now ask, what's the number, the Godel number of this statement? And Godel is very, very clever. Because he set this up so carefully that the number for this statement is the number g itself. So g is inside the statement, but g is also the number associated with the statement. So previously we had 2 equals 2, and its number was 72,900. But here, g is the number inside, and g is also the number of the statement. Translation, put g inside. I'm not a true statement in Principia Mathematica. Translation, this sentence is false. So much for Russell's theory of types. All that lovely work is happening in this beautiful hierarchy of types. And Godel said, well, actually, your numbers are powerful enough that I can use your numbers to catalog your logical statements. And I can build this paradox into it, no matter what you say about types. No matter what you say about hierarchies. I can find this paradox inside this. More generally, this works for any system powerful enough to build natural numbers. It's not just Principia. Anything that is an axiomatic system that can build the counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that can do number theory, they can answer questions of, is it 5, is it composite, is it the sum of cubes? Anything that's powerful enough to do that is powerful enough to do Godel numbering. If it's powerful enough to do Godel numbering, it's powerful enough to make this statement. It contains paragraphs. Oh, that was almost done. Oh, it's fine. Excellent. I'm nearly done. Conclusion. There is no completely provable mathematical system that is powerful enough to build arithmetic. Let's figure out what this means. So, there is systems that are powerful enough to build arithmetic. That's the good news. Principia and other systems like it. Principia is not the final one. The one we use now is a system called the Zermelo-Frankel axioms for set theory, but it's similar to Principia. There are powerful systems, but they're not complete. This is what Godel proved, is that they're powerful enough, they contain paradoxes. There is no way to build a system that is complete. It will always contain things that are undecidable. Statements that are neither true or false. Statements about which you can never decide their true state. Statements that are the mathematical equivalent of this sentence is false. It's not just a language problem. It's actually an internal, intrinsic, inside the logic mathematics problem. Unavoidable. Completely unavoidable inside. Anything powerful enough to build numbers is incomplete. Hence, the title of this result, published in 1931, is Godel's first incompleteness theory. All things powerful enough to build the natural numbers are inherently incomplete. Answer to David Hilbert's second problem proves that the axioms of number theory of arithmetic are consistent. Impossible. David Hilbert's second problem from his 23 problems is unsolvable. There is no complete, consistent system. All systems have paradox inside. What does this mean? What does this mean for mathematics? What does this mean for science? First question. Well, does it mean it all comes crashing down? We just all give up and go home and hand in our credentials and our PhDs and our PhDs and whatever else we might have, and like, oh, we're done, we can't build bridges anymore, we can't do mathematics anymore. It sits on a fuzzy foundation. Well, no, of course. We're all here, and we're all going to continue being the people we are, and those of us who are scientists and mathematicians are going to continue being scientists and mathematicians. So, no, the foundations, the foundation's not spelled correctly. Other than that, the foundation's not spelled correctly. Godel's results, as interestingly are also extremely austere. The statements that Godel found that are problematic are not something you'd ever naturally come across in mathematics. They're way up there. It's not like I'm going to be doing number theory and be trying to figure out whether a certain number is a prime, or whether their solution is the Fermat's theorem, or whether or not some other problem is true, and I'm going to come across something that is good or outside. It's just not going to happen. So, practically speaking, you're actually pretty safe. So for those of you who are worried, you're going to go home and have sort of nightmares and existential crises about the foundations of mathematics, you can basically rest assured that the walls are not crumbling down. But it does say that this isn't a perfect system. It does say that how we talk about it should change. That the 19th century enlightened this idea of a perfect, rigorous mathematical system built from first principles with consistent logic that will accomplish everything that it can accomplish in mathematics is not a reasonable goal. So it does give us some perspective and perhaps some humility in how we talk about these things. We can certainly still do mathematics. We can certainly still base science on it. But it gives us some notion that this project is perhaps not the pure world of Platonic forms we thought it was. perhaps not the ultimate panacea of Enlightenment temple to reason that was raised up to be in the 19th century. Perhaps not the paradise logical positivists put it up to be. Is there a choice in the system? Part of what's playing around with this is the fact that there are different ways to set this up, and there are different ways to adjust the incompleteness. And there are different options in the logical foundations of mathematics. That before you can start doing mathematics, you have to make choices about which actions you take, how you adjust for incompleteness, how you're going to set up the mathematics to make it work. And one of the things that really, really intrigues me about this is that, in a sense, this is the postmodern moment in mathematics. This is the moment mathematics changes from a modern, idealistic, we have one goal of a perfect system, to a fracturing of the perfect system doesn't exist anymore. We have come at it from a number of different perspectives, a number of different choices. And it intrigues me to no end that this happens in 1931 alongside the other currents in the 20th century of postmodern movements in philosophy, art, and the humanities, which, frankly, mathematicians don't tend to pay a lot of attention to. So the fact that these movements occur in parallel, even in the austere logical world of mathematics, I find it extremely fascinating. I haven't thought to the end of that, what's going on there, what interplay there is. If there was something in the postmodern ethos of Europe between the wars that gave Godel the insight he needed to find this, or if there's another interplay, maybe it's coming out of mathematics. Maybe mathematics is influencing instead of being a I don't know. But the parallel movement there between mathematics and the other disciplines in the 20th century is absolutely fascinating. Talk about that. I'm going to skip that now. Russell thought self-reference was a problem. Hilbert thought self-reference was a problem. One of the things that really Hofstadter is fantastic for is Hofstadter wants to reclaim self-reference as perhaps not a bug, but an extremely important feature. Self-reference is not automatic but necessary in systems, perhaps even in logical systems like mathematics. If you're interested in this, his 2008 book, I Am a Strange Loop, makes the connection between self-reference in complicated systems and the theory of human consciousness, which is absolutely fascinating. If you are intrigued by this notion of how self-reference works and what it leads to, by all means, pick this question up, pick that book up, I Am a Strange Loop, and see where you can take it. Is this the end of logic? Well, I hope not. You don't have LogiCON next year. It's not. I think it is in the certain overly idealistic version of what logic should be that dominated portions of 19th century thought and mathematics in the early part of the 20th century. I think it has taught some mathematicians a little bit of humility about what we're trying to accomplish and the degree to which that is absolute. We still certainly go on. We have a great deal of faith in what we accomplish. But we know something in the back of our heads that even if we accomplish all of our goals in mathematics, there are still things out there that are inherently completely undecidable. And you can decide for yourself after this half an hour whether or not that is a distress or a comfort. Thank you very much for listening.
Two things jumped out at me when I was listening to you, and I really enjoyed it. One is the conflicts, the contradictions, and so on. When I'm in front of a mirror and I see myself, that is not what is really there that other people see. There's obviously that difference. And the other one was in the use of and. For instance, 2 and 3. I suppose this might provide information for something else. And in your question there, you say that 2 and 3 may not be the same as 3 and 2. The order might be very different. Certainly with regards to human beings, how we approach things is different depending upon the information that we have. So the order of things. So if we see things this first as opposed to this, we get an entirely different result if we reverse them.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that intrigues me about the slightly postmodern nature of this is the fact that it makes human perspective somehow a part of doing mathematics. The mathematics is raised up culturally as this great Platonic universal that everyone looks up to as, well, 4 is equal to 4 and 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, and this is always true forever. And perhaps that's not quite as true and universal. Perhaps there is some notion of human perspective even built into the absolute foundation of mathematics. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I know there have been alternate logics suggested to maybe try and deal with some of these problems. Like, how have they tried to address, what kind of approaches have been taken to try and address it?
There's a number of ways you can go. It's generally accepted that Godel has proved the incompleteness of Principia Mathematics. The further implications of sort of where I was going with my questions, those are definitely well debated by logicians. I should not imply that my thinking on those is the consensus thinking in the community. Various logical systems have tried, people have gone for 3-value logics, different kinds of setups that allow for undecidable statements as part of the logical system from the get-go. This changes your notion of what paradox means. People have allowed for a different notion of hierarchy types that they think will work around what Godel was trying to say. Being not actually a practicing researching logician, I can't speak too much to how those efforts have gone, whether or not they've been successful, but it's certainly an active area of research.
There's kind of inherent paradox in the foundation of math from Godel. Is this something that really doesn't affect sort of your area of research or other areas of research? Is it really kind of constrained into the area where logicians work in, or does it have implications outside that box?
Yes, to your first one. It really doesn't affect the rest.
Okay.
Have you ever worried about incompleteness in your research, John?
Well, I mean, there's always the question of the axiom of choice that we kind of implicitly assume this by being undecidable from the others, which is a bit non-obvious. And that's sort of, in algebraic geometry certainly, that's hidden under the Nernst axiom.
And that's more of a choice for which axioms you take, rather than a really inherent incompleteness paradox issue.
Yeah. I think PhD students sometimes comfort themselves that their PhD problem is undecidable.
The likelihood that any given mathematics PhD problem is undecidable is practically zero.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thanks very much.